I think so. I'm Dan Haggerty. Did I say that already? This is The Story. All the ways to communicate with us at the bottom of your screen. I'm Dan Haggerty. Hey, 3 times the charm. Reach out using that hashtag HeyTan or email us at thestory@kgw.com. In the meantime, why don't we do some big story? And the big story tonight has to do with the elephant in the room. All right, I keep asking people in the Oregon GOP if they're concerned about the division that we're seeing in the party ranks, the impression of extremism from some of its members and messaging, and the fact that one of its elected leaders just got criminally charged for helping armed protesters bust into the Capitol in December. I keep asking about these things, and the Republicans I ask keep responding with something along the lines of, well, that's politics. But I'm curious what you think. Is it just politics? Why don't we start in court today? Representative Mike Nearman got arraigned on 2 charges for what you're seeing in this video here, opening locked doors in the Capitol in Salem for a crowd of people who were desperate to get inside, armed protesters who were demanding to be let in for a 1-day special session as the building was locked down for COVID protocols. Later that day, things got violent. The building was vandalized, a door was kicked in, an officer was assaulted.
Tim Gordon covered the story for us today. Now, Tim, I read that Nearman actually didn't even show up in court or on a Zoom or anything like that. Is that correct? And did he even put a plea in today?
Right. No, he was not in the courtroom today, Dan, and his attorney was there representing him. No plea was entered today. This was kind of billed as an arraignment, but really turned into being kind of an initial hearing. So no arraignment per se today.
Did we learn anything new? Did we learn anything from court today that we didn't already know?
No, this was about a hearing that lasted maybe 2 minutes or so. It was clearly just moving a little bit of paperwork, getting the ball rolling, the initial appearance. We've learned some other things outside the courtroom in the last week, though. One thing is Nearman apparently has a bad case of COVID. He told Lars Larson that on the Conservative Talkers radio show last week. Maybe that's why he wasn't in court today, didn't actually have to be there this time. He will likely have to be there at the next appearance and enter a plea. We're told that he plans to plead not guilty, and he'll want a jury trial on this.
What's the timeline on that? So what does happen next? What should we look out for?
Right. So that is actually coming up on June 29th is the date for that. Incidentally, this session, legislative session, is supposed to end June 27th, and he hasn't been attending that during this time. So that's set for just after the session ends.
Got it. Tim Gordon, thank you.
Bet.
Now, I also wanted to discuss this story, not just the Nearman part, but all of it, with a party leader. So I reached out to Herman Bertschuger. He's a former legislator, served almost a decade in the Senate until retiring this year as the minority leader, I might add. So he's an influential guy. And he used that influence to land him as the vice chair of the Oregon GOP. That's what he's doing now. I asked him about Rep. Nearman, and then the conversation kind of grew from there. Now, keep in mind, when he mentions an insurrection, we are discussing what happened at the Oregon Capitol in December, not what happened in D.C. Here's a few minutes now with one of the top Republicans in the state.
Well, since he is in front of the judge, I'm not going to comment on that at all, just because it's in that process. So as far as the insurrection at the Capitol, I don't know if it was an insurrection. I guess whatever. It probably wasn't a good thing to do. But on the other side is, our Constitution says that the legislature is supposed to be a public process, but this year it's still a public process, except without the public. So I'm a little disappointed in that.
You just referred to what happened when people in Oregon tried to kick in the front door. They bear-maced a police officer that day at the Capitol as probably not that good of an idea. You can see how that type of wording can land with some people who think that the Oregon GOP is just maybe a little detached from the impression that most people have of incidents like that.
Well, if you want to talk about violent incidents, well, let's talk about what's been going on in Portland for the last year and a half.
Well, sure, but you're familiar with the phrase, what's that have to do with the price of tea in China, though, right? Like, we're talking about just that one incident and what you just said. So I just want you to understand that people sometimes hear the way that that's phrased, like that probably wasn't that good of an idea, and they think, it felt a little bit more than that to me.
Well, like I said, when you compare it to what's been going on in Portland, I tried to talk about the Portland issue when I was still in the Senate and got gavelled down by the Senate president. They don't want to hear about what's going on in president. I'm certainly not condoning the behavior of the people that broke into the Capitol. But then on the other side, as I told the Senate president at the time, maybe we ought to listen to why they're so upset. Maybe we need to, at least whether we agree or disagree, we probably ought to listen to see why they are so upset. For somebody to take those kind of drastic actions and risk getting arrested and incarcerated, we probably, as legislators, I should say, listen to what they have to say, whether we agree or disagree.
And when you spoke up about the riots and the violence in Portland, did you say the same thing? Did you say we should listen to them? Do you see what I'm saying? You want to compare. You want to compare the two as justifiable. Like, hey, if they're going to justify the violence in Portland, I can justify the violence in Salem. No,
I don't want to get into that. But
I'm just confused. I guess I'm just confused by the how you're trying to rationalize it.
I'm not trying to rationalize it. I say I condone it. How many Democrats have you come out that have come out and talked about the violence in Portland in the last year? Violence anywhere, especially Salem at the legislature, there's really there's no room for it. It saddens me.
So, Bear Sugar, again, just recently got this elected position, this new position as the vice chair of the party. In fact, most of the party leadership changed recently during this last election. Now, you might be thinking, wait, I don't remember voting for that. Well, it's because you probably didn't. This is for party leaders and insiders. It's not something that shows up on your ballot. The job of this group here is essentially to steer the party, make sure everyone is working together, common goals, clear messaging, that sort of thing. The new chair of the Oregon GOP is that man, Dallas Hurd from Roseburg, and the treasurer is Dennis Linthicum from Klamath Falls. Both are often described as far-right conservatives. I mentioned those two people specifically because both of them are currently elected leaders, serving in Salem as we speak. Traditionally, these roles are held by people who are not currently serving in elected office, like Bear Sugar. And this irregularity, you could call it, has made some of their colleagues in Salem, on the Republican side, a little uncomfortable, like draft a new law uncomfortable. Senate Republicans just introduced a bill that would alter the state GOP leadership and make leaders pick one job or the other, elected lawmaker or GOP leader, not both. The bill is not exactly an indication of unity. A lot of this division, you could say, it may stem, at least recently, from a statement made by the Oregon GOP earlier this year following the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol in Washington. They drafted a referendum that claimed growing evidence that the assault in Washington was a false flag. Now, this false flag narrative is an untrue conspiracy theory, where some people claim that the crowd that stormed the Capitol wasn't made up of Republicans, extremists, white supremacists, and Trump supporters, as proved by thousands of FBI documents, social media posts, journalists, and local police departments across the country, but instead that it was orchestrated by Antifa and the such, in disguise, in MAGA hats. Now, if that sounds absurd to you, that's because it is absurd. And most of the Republicans in Salem gave a statement saying as much. But Dallas Hurd, the new chair, was not one of them. In fact, he's never really given us a comment about anything, yet alone giving me an interview, and we have asked. And no offense to Mr. Bear Sugar, but he was kind of my backup. A while back, when I was trying to get in touch with the leadership there, Hurd declined. I want to know what you think, okay, as we do each and every night. I want to hear from everyone, of course, but I want to hear from Republicans. I want to hear from people who don't belong to a specific party. I want to hear from you. I kind of already know what the Democrats are going to say. Send me an email or a message on social media. We'll stay on this topic because I do think it's a really important topic. I mean, Republicans are the minority party in Oregon. Their unity is vital to balanced democracy. And right now, they can't even agree on the walkouts anymore. Don't forget to use the hashtag #HeyDan. We started looking into this next story, frankly, because of all of your emails and tweets. It is complex. It's got several layers, but to sum it up, you wanted to know simply what is going on at Linfield University. Linfield is a small private university in McMinnville. It was actually founded as a Baptist college more than a century ago. Fast forward to now, 2021, where it's home to less than 2,000 students, a relatively small college, and recently accompanied by a slew of disturbing headlines. Students and faculty there are alleging instances of sexual harassment and assault by multiple Linfield trustees and one administrator. Some of those accusations have sparked criminal charges. There's also the firing of a tenured professor who says he tried to shine a light on all of this. And as if that's not enough, there are also allegations of racism mixed in there too. In short, things are not great at Linfield right now. And some there told our Maggie Vespa change has to come from the top down. Now, we should warn you, some of the details of this story are kind of hard to hear.
And I just was like, this is an environment that is not safe.
In the last few years, multiple people have brought allegations of harassment and assault against trustees and one high-ranking administrator at Linfield University in McMinnville. Dr. Jamie Friedman is one of the accusers. Keep in mind, she still works at Linfield.
It is so disheartening, absolutely.
Dr. Friedman says she reported 2 instances to the university. The first one happened in 2018 at an event for faculty and students.
And then all of a sudden I feel someone come behind me and rub my arms with both of their hands. And then a whisper in my ear that he was looking forward to meeting me again.
The man who she says approached her, Linfield president Dr. Miles Davis, pictured here on the school's website. Dr. Friedman says she went to HR.
I was told explicitly that that's just how men are.
On that specific comment, a Linfield spokesman says Dr. Friedman's account is not consistent with the information they have. The second instance happened in 2019 at a dinner for Linfield's Board of Trustees, one of whom was seated next to Dr. Friedman.
He put his hand on my bare shoulder, on my back, on my arm, on my thigh, and asked me if there was a Mr. Friedman, suggested that we should go out afterwards.
This time, Linfield hired an outside investigator who the school confirms found the incidents Dr. Friedman described happened, but did not violate the school's policies on sexual harassment or assault. Dr. Friedman's take?
That actually doesn't make it better, that makes it worse. We need new policies.
Still, she moved on until later that year when a student went public with an accusation of her own. As first reported by the Oregonian, in late 2019, a Linfield student filed a federal lawsuit against the university and against longtime trustee David Jubb. That student, through her attorney, declined a request for an interview, and KGW isn't using her name since she is a victim of an alleged sexual assault. The suit alleges Jubb, who has since resigned from the board, assaulted the student at a trustee dinner in February 2019 by reaching his hand under her dress and touching her genitals. In the wake of that suit's filing, more allegations against Jubb surfaced and criminal charges followed. David Jubb now faces 8 counts of sexual abuse against 4 different victims. The allegations date back to 2017. That's key because in that federal lawsuit, the student alleges Linfield was aware of Jubb's conduct and didn't do enough to stop him. Linfield says in some of those earlier cases, the school couldn't make contact with the complainants. In others, a spokesman says, complainants asked the school not to investigate. The university adds Jubb was instructed not to attend future student trustee events. Jubb, through his attorney, declined to comment ahead of his trial in November. It's worth noting more allegations of harassment have continued to surface at Linfield. Last week, the Oregonian reported 4 Linfield trustees have now been accused by students and faculty of inappropriate touching or comments. Linfield reportedly maintains in every case but Jubb's, trustees did not violate university policy. A lot of this has been kind of bubbling up under the surface at Linfield, but recently it became a national story. Why? Well, it started with Twitter. In March, Daniel Pollock Pelsner tweeted a thread about why he, a tenured professor, was fired from Linfield. He said he tried to help students report instances of abuse by trustees, tweeting, quote, "The Board of Trustees chair accused me, a Jewish trustee, of harboring a secret agenda to grab power." He wrote Linfield President Miles Davis said people like him were destroying Linfield, adding Davis had previously made comments about measuring the size of Jewish noses. The Anti-Defamation League called for President Davis to resign. The NAACP alleged racial bias against Davis and came to Linfield's defense. Davis is seen here in the New York Times, which covered the whole ordeal. Pollock Pelsner declined a request for an interview. Linfield has, for its part, categorically denied Pollock Pelsner's story, adding they hired an outside law firm to investigate those allegations of racist comments. And, quote, "The law firm found no way to prove that any such remarks were made." In a letter, President Davis called Pollock Pelsner's accusations a smear campaign, and the school told the New York Times the professor was fired for cause. They wouldn't elaborate to us. A spokesman for Linfield emailed KGW an online fact sheet about all the allegations. It reads, quote, "A small but vocal group of faculty maintain that Linfield University is an unsafe place. That is untrue." It goes on to say Linfield is dedicated to ensuring that all our campus communities, including students, faculty, staff, and trustees, understand Linfield's policies and abide by them. The fact sheet also said last year Linfield launched district-wide task forces to investigate its policies related to students and employees.
Okay, wow. What a mess. So let's touch base with Maggie for just a second. Maggie, where does this school go from here?
Definitely. Well, what we know at this point is that despite calls, President Davis, the president of Linfield University, has said he will not resign. And in fact, amid all of this, no one kind of in positions of power has resigned except for David Jubb. He's the now former trustee who's facing those criminal charges. And then as far as the school's policies go, again, they told us that their current policies are in line with Title IX and federal law, as well as that of other comparable universities and colleges. But again, amid all of these allegations, they are now reviewing those policies.
Okay, Maggie, keep us posted.
So, what's it going to take for Oregon to reopen? Well, the governor just gave us the magic number we need to hit.
I'm setting a specific target for us to reach, 70%.
And something fishy is going on with our fish. Salmon are getting smaller, and scientists are trying to figure out exactly why.
What's going on? I mean, that's the million-dollar question.
When the story continues. Okay, all right, yeah, got a lot of emails. I figured we would. We touched on some pretty touchy topics off the top. I was kind of pushing Herman Bertschiger in that last interview. So if you have questions about it, we'll address some of them at the end of the show. Keep them coming. Use that hashtag, HeyDan. Now, if you missed it, Governor Kate Brown just announced a vaccination target that we have to hit for Oregon to reopen. Yes, holy mackerel, we're using that word. Statewide, 70% of people who are 16 and older, people eligible for the shot, they need to get at least the first dose, 70%. And when we hit that target, the governor says most restrictions will be lifted. That means that you might still have to wear a mask in some places, but businesses can fully reopen. Now, before we get there, counties can actually apply to move to the lowest risk level starting May 21st, which means places like restaurants and gyms and movie theaters could expand to 50% capacity. To get there, counties have to hit 65% of people eligible, 16 and older, with at least one dose. So, with that in mind, let's take a look at where we stand right now. And we're going to do things a little differently tonight if you're a regular viewer. See, the numbers behind me, almost 2 million Oregonians have gotten at least their first dose. And that works out to be about 57% of the population who is 16 and older. All right, up until now, we've been giving you the percentage of the entire population, kids included, because the conversation has been mostly about herd immunity. But now we're talking about something different. The governor's new metrics here. So that's where we're going to start calculating the percentage this way from here on out. We're also now using numbers directly from the state, not necessarily the CDC, which we were using before. So enough of that. How long is it going to take for us to get to 70%? Well, the state thinks it'll be about 4 to 6 weeks based on the vaccine demand, which is steadily falling. But 4 to 6 weeks, that's middle of June. Now, let's take a look at the first dose vaccination rates for individual Oregon counties. Again, this is everyone 16 and older. Some counties like Hood River and Benton, they're already there. They're at 65% mark as we speak, and that's what you need to move into that lower risk level after you apply with the state. Multnomah County, they're actually pretty close. They're at 63%. Some rural counties, though, are very far away. They are in the 30 to 40% range. So they're going to be aiming for us to hit that 70 mark as a state before they probably hit 65%. Now, let's take a look at the numbers in Washington right now. More than 3.49 million people have gotten at least their first dose of the vaccine. That works out to be almost 57% of the state's population who are 16 and older. Now, Washington, they haven't announced any sort of vaccine target for reopening like Oregon did today. But here's what Governor Jay Inslee did say last week.
And we know vaccines are the ticket to full reopening, and we're very pleased about the success to date in that regard. But we need to continue to those efforts.
He also said it is a possibility the vaccine metrics will be tied to the reopening plan there. We'll let you know if they make any decisions like that in Washington. Now, since we're talking about restaurants adding more capacity, let's talk a little fine dining, shall we? All right, put our pinkies out and have a little discussion. You know what I'm in the mood for tonight? I'm usually kind of a steak kind of dude, but I think maybe some seafood, maybe some salmon. Only problem is, apparently some chefs have been sending their shipments of salmon back. Why? Because they're too small. Turns out the fish are shrinking. Keely Chalmers looks into why that's happening.
What's going on? I mean, that's the $1 million question.
Commercial fisherman Greg Johnson has been fishing for salmon for more than 40 years. These photos are of him fishing the Columbia just upriver from St. Helens. He also fishes off the coast of Alaska. That $1 million question of his, why are the salmon shrinking?
On the Columbia River, for example, salmon are smaller than, say, they were 10 years ago.
Johnson says it's the case with the sockeye up in Alaska and the Chinook, even the coho to some extent in the Columbia.
So a 14-pound fish 10 years ago might be an 11-pound or a 10.5-pound fish at the smallest right now.
And that smaller size is impacting profits.
As commercial fishermen, we weigh our production in total poundage. So if you catch the same amount of fish and they're 10% lighter, then you're down 10% in your production.
But Johnson has noticed a pattern. The years when the fish are the smallest are the years the ocean is the warmest.
It seems to be surrounding this warmer ocean events.
And the interannual fluctuations that we see can clearly be linked to ocean conditions.
Fisheries biologist Mark Johnson is with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. He says a warming climate is, without a doubt, one cause.
In recent years, we've had more than our fair share of warm oceans, and that generates smaller fish because there's less feed out there for them.
But he says there are likely other contributing factors too, like how the hatcheries are managed and a growing killer whale population.
Researchers from NOAA and the University of Washington a few years back presented some pretty compelling data that suggested that they might be contributing to the decline of our salmon as well.
Other research has shown the fish are smaller simply because they're returning from the ocean at younger ages, although scientists don't really know why. Mark Johnson believes it's likely the salmon adapting to better survive a changing climate and a changing ocean.
I suspect that if we see continuation of warming trends in our ocean waters, we'll see these populations of salmon continuing to decline in size.
Keely Chalmers, KGW News.
All right, keep sending in some comments. We're tight on time, but hopefully I can address something. We'll see how we look after the commercial break. We'll see you next. Welcome back. I wish we had more time. Lots of comments, lots of people writing in, especially about our talk about the elephant in the room, discussing the Oregon GOP off the top of the show. Keep your questions coming in. Keep your comments coming in. We'll address some of them tomorrow. There's more to show from my interview with Herman Barrett Sugar, talking about a lot of things happening with the Republican Party in the state of Oregon right now. So please, stay tuned. Watch the story tomorrow night. We'll keep addressing this topic in the meantime. See you then.